Hello everyone, this is ManyNinjas speaking. As you can see, we are indeed moving along in a timelier fashion this time around to the next part of the collection video set, which is indeed my Sega Saturn collection. For the most part, actually I should really say entirely my Saturn is actually all just import games. It just so happens the reason I'm kind of doing this is because for the most part they tend to be cheaper in general. Oh, I should mention there's a few PlayStation games in this box, we'll talk about those a little later. But as I was saying, I tend to go for the import ones just because, one, they're in more of a standard CD casing here, as opposed to the kind of long box or letterbox format that was used for the North American versions of the games, which makes them easier to store for one. I could just put them in anything that can fit a standard CD rack. And the second thing is, a lot of the games I happen to pick up are either fighting-based games or something with minimal text, so I rather pick up the import versions because they tend to be on the cheaper end of things. With that little intro out of the way, let's start from the top, the first box here. Starting from the first one, we actually have Dynamite Deca, otherwise known as, locally, Die Hard Arcade, based off what the arcade game was. Generally speaking, can't go wrong with the title, do enjoy it. The only thing that makes this particular version a little harder is just because the prompts for what buttons to hit during cutscenes are in Japanese, so at that point you won't really react as much as you have to react and kind of memorize what the terms or what the actual symbols are and what they're supposed to represent. Other than that, generally a fun game. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Honestly, as long as you made sure to have the appropriate RAM upgrade or kind of a backup there, most of the fighting games, especially the arcade-based ones, actually run really well off the Saturn, perform generally better than the PlayStation versions by far. So it's as close as you can get to the arcade experience on hand. Dragon Ball Z Shin Butoden. I know I'm about to butchering that last part. Basically, this is the more complete, or at least more polished version of Ultimate Battle 22. Generally, I really should mention that one more balanced. The graphics are slightly better in quality, I find, or at least they feel the part. But the game, honestly, is not that good, let's be honest. Alright, Garou Densetsu 3, Road to the Final Victory. Kind of trying to just, so it's not in shadow there. Okay, so Fatal Fury 3. Not the best of the Fatal Fury series, I have to say. I'd have to say something more like Fatal Fury Special I'd enjoyed more. But it's there, and I found it for a decent price, so why not? Alright, this one's kind of a larger one. Ah, yes. Street Fighter 2 movie. The weird thing about this particular game, which also did appear on the PlayStation, I should mention, this one never actually made it across the North American shore because, as the background will kind of say there, or kind of show there, the weird thing about this is, while it does have a bit of a fighting game element on there, very limited I should say, the majority of the game is actually just kind of a cropped version of the Street Fighter 2 animated film, but with certain added scenes to include an extra generic monitor cyborg character, which you're technically playing the role as. The way that particular game works is that you actually watch through the movie, occasionally using the controller in order to input, basically record data, so to speak, to power up your monitor cyborg, leading into the final battle between not Ryu and Vega, but actually Ryu and your monitor cyborg. You play as a cyborg, which is basically a robotic version of Ken in actual gameplay, and try to beat Ryu. And depending on how you perform in the gathering data in the earlier parts of the game, it will determine what your ending is. If you lose the fight, though, the movie or the game kind of continues as normal in terms of what the film has. It's a weird little thing. I pick up a lot of Street Fighter games, so that's kind of how it went down. Alright, another little weird one is Shin Shinobi-den. Generally, this is actually kind of a live-action version of from the Shinobi series, also known as Shinobi Legions in North America. Generally, the reason I found this one a little curious is because when I actually got this, it was described as a used game. I got it for like a few bucks, less than $10 total, I really want to think, or maybe not 10, but like 12, 14 max. And it was actually still wrapped up and everything. I think it was actually still brand new when I opened it up. Why I opened it up? Because I wanted to play the game. Alright, next game up, Sonic R. Okay, so it's one of those little curious Sonic games out there. The label... Oh wait, that's actually supposed to be that way. Yeah. generally speaking, 3D racing game does not handle very well. I picked it up just for shits and giggles. Gotta be honest, that's kind of the reason there. Next one up, Street Fighter 02. Generally handles really well, controls really well, especially with the Saturn controller. I do enjoy cracking this in every now and then. Although my favorite of the Alpha games, or Zero games I should say, is Alpha 3. But unfortunately the Saturn version of the game is a tad expensive at the moment, so I'm still actually looking for a reasonably priced copy of that one. Alright, Marvel Superheroes. Generally speaking, pretty fun game. I do enjoy the later Versus games, since this is still part of the Versus library. I enjoyed the later ones in there before Marvel vs. Capcom 1, which is alright, but just a little weird to play still, I find. But generally, I picked this one for a decent price, so a nice addition to the collection there. Let's see, Panzer Dragoon Zwei. This is actually the game I got with the system when I picked it up. I picked it up from a relatively local record store that happens to also sell game stuff. I believe it was Last Gen Records in the downtown Toronto area near College and Spadina. And they happen to be selling, at the time they mentioned on Facebook, I believe, as a Facebook post, that they got a white Sega Saturn along with this game and a controller and a cable, and all the related cables. So I decided, why the hell not? I always kind of wanted a Saturn anyway, so for the price they're asking, good deal. I'm happy with the purchase overall. Just gonna see for the rest of my collection here. Alright, the original Street Fighter Zero. Fun game. I prefer 2 and 3 especially more, but hey, you gotta start from somewhere. Alright, let's see the next one up. Dragon Ball Z Legends. I actually remember playing this more on the as an import PlayStation title. So generally speaking, it plays really fairly nicely here. Although the differences between the versions off the top of my head is that this version doesn't handle 3D as well, and because the Saturn honestly was not well set up for 3D games. So there's a lot of flickering whenever there's anything supposed to be using a 3D model or effect compared to the PlayStation version of the game. And I don't believe transparencies were handled as well either. So it's basically, that's due to more system limitations. It's still a nice game. Alright, Vampire Savior. I enjoyed the Vampire Savior. I enjoyed the Darkstalker series a lot, which is funny because I am generally bad at these games. I like fighting games. I could say I'm maybe mediocre or average on a lot of fighting games, but in this one, I just can't seem to get the hang of it. But I enjoy it anyway, so I don't mind too terribly. Alright, let me just make sure which one I've got there. Oh, already went that one. Alright, next up on the docket is Golden Axe the Duel. Basically, a very forgettable fighting game, to be honest there. Sega title there. To be honest, I imagine I must have picked this up for cheap. I have played this a few times. It's interesting as part of the Golden Axe series, but it's not a really good fighting game. It's very forgettable, really. Alright, Street Fighter Real Battle on Film. Yes, because you have to have at least one version of the Van Damme fighting game. Just for shits and giggles, you have to have this handy. Thankfully, this plays a little better than the original arcade model off the top of my head. So unfortunately, I don't recall if we have, this is the game still has ridiculous stuff like Sagat basically shooting eye lasers out of the eye patch eye and other ridiculous things. I think this is the one where it's a little more based off of closer to the Street Fighter 2 turbo engine, or super turbo at this point, which is good. So at least that means it's still somewhat playable. Alright, Advanced VG. Not the greatest fighting game series out there, but generally I collect a lot of fighting games, as you probably noticed. So when another one pops up for a decent price, I usually pick it up. I actually recently picked up Super VG for the Super Famicom, so this is kind of another one further down the line. Played it a bit. It's not terrible, but it's probably not my first choice of fighter either. Getting these things back in the box is always hard with one hand because I'm always... Come on. You know, I'll get back to that in a second. Let's move on to the next game. Groove on Fight by Atlas. In this one, it's a bit of a weird fighting game, but it actually is quite nice. Generally speaking, it's kind of a team-based fighter. You end up picking 2 different characters and kind of switching and swapping out of them. Kind of reminds me of Kazuna Encounter in a little bit there, but the graphics, I'd argue Kazuna Encounter had some slightly nicer graphics overall there. And I believe this is also still part of the... What's the name of the series? This is actually part of the same thing that as Matchroom Lee actually comes from. I am completely drawing a blank on what that general series of games is. It's not Power Instinct, I think. If anyone happens to remember what general series this comes from, please drop me a line in the comments, because I honestly just can't remember right now. Alright. Next up in the line, something with blue font. Vampire Hunter. Once again, enjoy the series of games. I played more Vampire Savior than Vampire Hunter per se, but hey, if you're going to collect one, you might as well get them all. Especially the Capcom fighters for the Saturn. They tend to be really nice, so there's no reason not to get them. That being said, then we have something like X-Men Children of the Atom. Do I generally enjoy the game? Yes. Not very good at it, but still enjoy it. But the Saturn port itself was a bit of a letdown, basically. It just doesn't handle as well. It's a bit on the choppier end of things. This was probably the first Saturn game, or first arcade port that they did, so it wasn't exactly arcade perfect. Thankfully, they got better after this one. Alright, next one up is Super Puzzle Fighter 2 X. Basically, I like my puzzle games as well, almost as much as I like my fighting games. So when you have something that ties the 2 together, yeah, I'm gonna pick it up. Alright, last one for the first box will be the original Panzer Dragoon. Basically, trying to collect a little bit of all of them. This one was available for a decent price, so I picked it up at the time. I haven't had the chance to really play much of it though, so I can't comment too much about that gameplay for the first one. Alright, moving on to the next one, we have Puyo Puyo Sun. I was not kidding, I actually do have a lot of Puyo Puyo games. I enjoyed the hell out of them, but I don't exactly get a lot of time there. Speaking of which, skipping around along to Puyo Puyo 2. I honestly collect a lot of things from the series. I don't have as much time to play them as I'd want, but I still want to have them handy. Whenever I find a lot of time, I will get a chance to finally play a lot of them. Or play them each. Waku Waku 7. This one is actually more known for appearing on the Saturn, not on the Saturn, on the Neo Geo off the top of my head in terms of the arcade format. Basically, it's a quirky little fighting game from Sunsoft. Quite enjoyable to play, not a very serious thing. Has bonus con for those that are familiar with the character, so you can't go wrong with this one. Alright, next game up, Puzzle Bobble 2X. In terms of puzzle games, the ones I get most of, Puzzle Bobble games. Basically anything with the Bubble Bobble characters I will end up collecting. As you probably noticed, the plushes among other things hanging around there. Saturn Bomberman. A bit of a weirder Bomberman game because it was actually a bit of a 3D title, at least 2.5D, isometric, etc, etc. Not the weirdest Bomberman game out there, as there actually is an RPG game for the Saturn that's Bomberman based. Oh, I forgot I actually had this one. Galaxy Fight. Another Sunsoft based game. This was the original one with bonus con and everything and in there. Generally fun time. I enjoyed playing this, or playing the Saturn, or not the Saturn, the Neo Geo copy of the game. So once I had the opportunity to pick up a physical copy for the Saturn, I had to go for it. Alright, Cyberbots. This would actually be a Saturn game I would easily recommend there. This is actually based off the limited edition, which would be, if you got it originally, would have a couple of different extras on there, and came in a more impressive box. Unfortunately, I can only find the loose game itself, but hey, at least I have a copy of the game. It's actually a really nice fighting game by Capcom there. Alright, this, unfortunately, I can't remember the full Japanese game in there, but this is kind of a weird RTS Godzilla game that's going on there. Only, you're not playing as Godzilla, unfortunately, but rather as the Japanese Defense Forces, which basically begs, what the hell is the point? The only reason I really picked that up is because it was a Godzilla-based game, and it was for cheap at the time, I'm going to be honest there. Alright, this is actually a more recent acquisition, Last Bronx. I actually have not had the chance to play it, but I already knew that basically, just based off the back here, it's a 3D-esque fighting game, or 2.5D, however you want to go on it there. And of course, I have to collect my fighting games. Picked up at the same time as that, a Virtua Fighter Remix, which, as you can see, I didn't even bother removing the sticker at the time. I did not pay a lot for. The case itself is a bit beat up there, but I enjoy the original Virtua Fighter, so I never had a chance really to play Remix when during my limited time with the Saturn beforehand, so hey, I wanted to go for it. Alright, this camera is getting a little on the warm side, so we're going to make this last part real fast. The few PlayStation games I do have, thankfully I picked up a copy originally out of Toys R Us back in the day of the original Mega Man Legends. A bit on the pricey side now. God help you if you're trying to find a copy of Mega Man Legends 2 now. Bomberman Party Edition. Don't remember when I picked this up, but it must have been fairly recent. This was actually handed me just randomly, a copy of Spider-Man for the PlayStation. I honestly don't really collect PlayStation games too much, but I happen to have it here, so why not? And this one, I actually wanted to have a copy of Mega Man 8 Anniversary Edition for the PlayStation handy. Unfortunately, this copy is actually a little on the busted side. None of the PlayStation systems I have are actually able to run the disc because it was honestly pretty badly scratched up when I got it. And even after an attempt to basically, as the last ditch ever, use something or use a service to try to repair the disc, I can't actually run this in my system still. I could run it off the PC and just use something like a EXP or EPSXE in order to run the game that way. But one of these days I do want to replace this with a copy and I can run an actual system there. Alright, that's enough of the Saturn and inadvertently the PlayStation collected this time. If anyone happens to know any other good Saturn games that I should be looking for, especially fighting games, or where to pick up a cheap copy of Street Fighter 03 for that matter, seriously, drop me a line, especially for that last one. Really, I would really like to add the last Zero game on there. And if you have any comments or anything else there, please like, comment, and subscribe. Seriously, I do try to get to all the comments that come along on my videos as probably as I can, or at least when time permits there. And especially if you guys have any suggestions of any good Saturn stuff, seriously, drop me a line. I really would like to add more stuff to my Saturn collection since while I do have a decent chunk for some guy who never actually had Saturn stuff in the heyday, I need some more stuff just to try to balance it out a bit. Alright, well, thank you very much for watching. Take care and catch you all later. And in case I don't have another video out by this weekend, have a good weekend.